Liam Carter thought he was marrying a trusting heiress. Evelyn Reed was about to marry him to a life sentence of ruin. Or, Evelyn Reed planned a perfect wedding. Diana Reed planned the perfect betrayal. Only one of their plans would survive the ceremony. The sun poured through the high windows of the upscale bistro, glinting off the polished silverware and giving the whole scene a warm, golden glow. For Evelyn Reed, this felt like the final, perfect brushstroke on the painting of her life. Liam Carter, sitting across from her, reached for her hand, his smile effortless and his blue eyes crinkling just so. He had that effect. He made everything feel easy, glamorous. A rising star in commercial real estate, Liam wasn't just handsome. He was convincing. He could sell a condo or a dream with equal charm, and Evelyn had bought the most beautiful dream of all, him. Their engagement, just 6 weeks after their first date, had been a whirlwind of couture dresses, tasting menus, and envy from her friends. It was the kind of fast-track romance she'd seen in movies, and she'd happily taken the leading role. Evelyn's mother, Diana, was her co-star and director in this production. At 45, Diana Reed was a woman who had poured the energy she'd once devoted to a crumbling marriage into curating an impeccable life. She was slender, impeccably dressed, and carried an air of mild, expensive melancholy that had vanished the moment Liam entered their lives. He called her his future favorite girl, and Diana bloomed under the attention. She'd taken over wedding planning with military precision, insisting that her only daughter deserved nothing less than absolute perfection. The three of them became a unit, a tight-knit trio, scrolling through fabric swatches and vineyard venues, their laughter constant. To Evelyn, it was proof of her good fortune. She was gaining a husband and securing an even deeper bond with her best friend, her mom. The cracks, when they began to appear, were hairline fractures, so fine you'd miss them if you weren't looking. And for a long time, Evelyn wasn't. It was a Friday evening, 2 months before the wedding. Diana had come over to Evelyn's apartment to finalize the floral arrangements. When Liam arrived, fresh from a closing, he'd swept in and kissed Evelyn on the cheek. But as he pulled away, a familiar, complex scent of jasmine and sandalwood lingered in the air. It was Linterdet, Diana's signature perfume, an exclusive fragrance she special ordered from Paris. Evelyn made a light comment. Someone's been shopping at Mom's vanity. And Liam had laughed it off, blaming a hug at a recent party. The explanation was plausible, but the seed was planted. A week later, during a chaotic final fitting at the bridal salon, Evelyn watched from the pedestal as her mother's phone, left face up on a plush chair, lit up with a notification. The preview text was brief. Can't stop thinking about last night. Told you the drive would be worth it. The sender was listed as LC Liam Carter. Evelyn's blood ran cold, but her face, reflected in the vast mirror, remained a placid mask. She told herself it was about a surprise, a gift, a bachelor party detail. But the perfume, the late nights Liam claimed were spent at the gym or with clients, the way his eyes sometimes followed Diana across a room with a familiarity that felt new and private. These fragments began to swirl in her mind, forming a picture she desperately didn't want to see. That night, lying awake in her silent apartment, the happy narrative of her future began to rewrite itself into a darker, more terrifying draft. The perfect picture was still hanging on the wall, but she was now seeing the first, faint shadows of the ugly truth lurking behind the frame. The following days passed in a surreal blur. Evelyn moved through her appointments and planning sessions like an automaton, her smile a practiced reflex. Inside, a cold, quiet engine had started up, overriding the initial shock and pain. She observed Liam and Diana with a new, clinical detachment. She noted how her mother's laughter seemed just a note higher when Liam told a story, how her hand would linger on his arm a fraction too long. She saw the way Liam's gaze would drop to Diana's lips when she spoke, a look she had once believed was reserved only for her. The evidence was a quiet, accumulating poison. The night before the rehearsal dinner, a grim resolve solidified within her. The suspicion was a corrosive acid, and she needed the stark, undeniable truth, no matter how devastating. She knew Liam would be spending that evening alone at their future marital home, a modern, sleek house he had been overseeing the final renovations on. He'd mentioned he'd be there late, unpacking boxes of his things. It was the perfect opportunity. Evelyn drove to an electronics store across town, paying in cash for a small, high-quality voice-activated recorder. Her hands were steady, her movements efficient. Arriving at the new house, she saw Liam's car was gone. Using her key, she let herself into the echoing, sparsely furnished space. The scent of fresh paint and new carpet filled the air, a scent that was supposed to be the promise of a fresh start. Now it felt like a hollow shell. She walked into the master bedroom, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The bed was just a mattress on the floor, a single set of sheets crumpled on it. She forced herself to focus. She needed a spot that was inconspicuous, yet close enough to capture everything. Her eyes landed on the heavy, fabric-lined drawer of the nightstand. She carefully tucked the small device deep into the back corner, beneath a stack of linen, ensuring the tiny microphone hole faced outward. She activated it with a press of a button, a soft red glow blinking once before it became invisible in the darkness. She left as quietly as she had come, the house swallowing her exit. The rehearsal dinner the next evening was a masterpiece of her new acting skills. She wore a dress Diana had helped pick, laughed at Liam's jokes, and toasted to their bright future. The performance was flawless. All the while, the recorder was sitting in that dark drawer, a silent witness. The following morning, she fabricated an excuse about finalizing the marriage license to return to the house alone. Liam was already at the gym, his schedule predictable. The silence in the bedroom was oppressive as she retrieved the device. Sitting in her car, parked a few blocks away, she took a deep, shuddering breath and plugged in the earbuds. The sounds that poured forth were not just of intimacy, which was getting enough. It was the conversation that followed that plunged her world into total, frozen darkness. Their voices, languid and satisfied, wove a new, horrifying plot. They spoke of the wedding fund, the money from her father's life insurance that she had poured into their shared account for the wedding, and a down payment. They mockingly called it their escape fund. Diana's voice, low and conspiratorial, outlined a plan to wait until the checks cleared after the lavish wedding, then disappear on a honeymoon from which only two would return. Liam chuckled, calling Evelyn a trusting little bird, easily plucked. The betrayal was so much deeper, so much colder than mere infidelity. It was a financial and emotional demolition. In that moment, the last fragment of Evelyn's old heart shattered. What rose from the ashes was not grief, but something sharp, clear, and utterly focused. The wedding was in 4 days. She now had a schedule and a purpose. It would not be a celebration. It would be a reckoning. The initial, searing wave of emotion, the heartbreak, the rage, the suffocating sense of violation, lasted only for the drive home. By the time Evelyn pulled into her own driveway, a strange, unnerving calm had settled over her. The tears wouldn't come. Instead, her mind, usually a canvas for color palettes and design layouts, began assembling a different kind of plan. It was a chillingly logical process, viewing Liam and Diana not as lovers or betrayers, but as targets in a complex project. Their own words had given her the timeline, for days until they believed they would win. She would use every single one of those days to ensure their very public downfall. The first step was intelligence. She needed access. Years of helping Diana with technology gave her an advantage. That afternoon, under the guise of finalizing the wedding slideshow, she brought her mother a special thank you latte. While Diana sipped it, Engrossed in a call with the florist, Evelyn's fingers flew across the laptop keyboard. In minutes, she had installed a nearly undetectable keylogger, a program that would record every keystroke, every password, every website Diana visited. She also synced her mother's phone contacts and calendar to a cloud folder she could access. The digital ghost of Diana Reed was now hers to observe. Liam was trickier, more tech-savvy. His strength, however, was his own arrogance. That evening, she visited him at the new house, playing the part of a nervous, excited bride. She brought dinner and a request. "I'm so paranoid about losing my wedding ring at the reception," she said, her eyes wide. "I read about these tiny GPS trackers people put in luggage. Maybe we could slip one into the ring box, just for peace of mind." Intrigued by the tech and flattered by her dependency, Liam not only agreed but took charge, ordering a sleek, magnetic tracker. He linked it to his own phone to set it up, showing her the app. In that moment, she memorized his passcode as his finger moved across the screen. The next day, when he left his phone charging in the kitchen to take a shower, she had 60 seconds to install an identical tracking app, her own login hidden in a folder. Now she could see his every move. The information began to flow in, painting a damning portrait of their double life. She saw hotel booking confirmations from weeks past, under an alias. She read their flurry of panicked texts after the rehearsal dinner, worried Evelyn seemed off. Most crucially, she accessed their financial records. Liam had several hidden credit cards nearing their limits. Diana had been slowly liquidating a small investment portfolio. They were both financially strained, which made the wedding fund an even more irresistible prize. Evelyn sat in the dark glow of her computer monitors, a conductor studying a sinister score. She knew their secrets, their pressures, and their greed. The foundation of their world was built on sand, and she now possessed the perfect tide to wash it all away. All she had to do was apply the right pressure in the right places, and let their own lies and desperation do the rest. The game was no longer about catching them. It was about guiding them, step by step, toward their own destruction. The morning of day one dawned bright and clear. Evelyn dressed with deliberate care, choosing an outfit that was soft and vulnerable, a visual echo of the trusting woman Liam and Diana believed her to be. She met Liam for breakfast at their favorite cafe. Over avocado toast, she spun her first lie with breathtaking simplicity. Her eyes shimmered with excited tears as she described a final, breathtaking wedding gift for him. A close friend from college, she claimed, worked for a luxury travel agency and had secured them an incredible deal. A month-long, all-expenses-paid honeymoon to Bali, with private villas and a personal chef. It was a surprise meant for after the ceremony, but she was too thrilled to keep it in. She showed him forged booking confirmations on her phone, documents she had crafted with her designer's eye for detail. Liam's reaction was a masterclass in false emotion. His face cycled through surprise, delight, and overwhelming gratitude, pulling her into a tight embrace. But over his shoulder, Evelyn's expression was stone. She knew what he was really thinking. A month in Bali with Diana, funded by this unexpected windfall, was an even sweeter prize than they had planned. His greed, as predicted, blinded him to the trap. Day two was for financial ghosts. Using the keylogger data, Evelyn had mapped the fragile ecosystem of Liam and Diana's reputations. She spent hours in a quiet corner of the public library, creating a series of flawless, damning documents. She fabricated loan agreements and bank statements that suggested Liam had a secret, spiraling gambling addiction, complete with threatening letters from a fictional loan shark named Vince. She mailed these anonymously to two key addresses: Liam's meticulous and morally rigid business partner, and Diana's ex-husband, a stern financial auditor who already despised Liam. By late afternoon, the first tremors began. Liam's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from his furious partner, demanding an emergency meeting. Diana received a cold, lengthy email from her ex-husband, warning her of Liam's profound instability and threatening to revisit their alimony agreement. The chaos was private, but it was a critical first fracture, turning their closest allies into skeptics. Day 3 required a delicate, poisonous touch. It was time to turn the conspirators against each other. Using Diana's banking passwords, Evelyn logged in from an encrypted connection. She initiated a series of tiny, international wire transfers, $200 here, $150 there, from Diana's savings to a corporate account with a name eerily similar to a shell company Liam had once mentioned in passing. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate flags, but formed a clear pattern. Then she planted the evidence. She created a string of fake email exchanges between Liam's real email and a dummy account, making it appear he was subtly pressuring Diana to move money for a can't-miss investment. She left this digital trail subtly accessible on Diana's laptop. That evening, from her own home, Evelyn watched the tracker dots representing Liam and Diana remain stationary at their respective homes. No clandestine meeting, no phone calls. The silence was more telling than any conversation. The seed of mutual distrust had been planted in the fertile ground of their own guilt and avarice. They were no longer a unified front. They were two nervous individuals, starting to eye each other with suspicion, just as the walls of their perfect scheme began to whisper of impending collapse. The morning of the wedding arrived under a deceptively brilliant blue sky. Evelyn stood before her mirror, not as a nervous bride, but as a soldier preparing for a final, decisive battle. She smoothed the pristine white silk of her gown, a masterpiece Diana had tearfully helped her choose. Every stitch, every pearl, now felt like part of a costume for the performance of a lifetime. Her makeup was flawless, her eyes clear and steady. There was no trace of the sleepless nights or the cold fury that had fueled her. In their place was a serene, almost ethereal calm. Today, the carefully laid traps would spring, not in the shadows, but in the most brutally public arena imaginable. The ceremony was held at the picturesque vineyard Diana had booked. Guests buzzed with happy anticipation, unaware they were about to become witnesses to a social execution. Evelyn walked down the aisle on the arm of a willing cousin, her gaze fixed on Liam at the altar. He looked the part of the perfect groom, his smile bright, but she could see a new tension around his eyes. The financial accusations from his partner had rattled him. Diana, seated in the front row, was a vision and mother of the bride Lavender, but her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. The planted emails had done their work. She had been distant with Liam all morning, her smiles brittle. The officiant began to speak. Just as he asked, "If anyone present knows of any reason why this couple should not be joined in marriage," the first phase of Evelyn's plan activated. A low, synchronized buzz rippled through the congregation as every single phone in the venue, from pockets and clutches, chimed at once. Confused glances were exchanged. Then came a second, more insistent chime. With a collective, reluctant curiosity, people looked at their screens. An anonymous message read, "For the truth about the bride and groom, click here." The link led to a clean, edited audio clip, just 30 seconds. It was Liam's voice, intimate and clear. "Once the wedding fund clears, we're gone. That trusting little bird will be left with an empty nest." Then Diana's reply, a low laugh. "She'll be too humiliated to even call the police." A deafening silence descended, followed by a wave of horrified whispers. Liam's face drained of all color. Diana shot up from her seat, her hand flying to her mouth. Before they could utter a word, the second act began. The large projection screen behind the officiant, meant to display childhood photos, flickered to life. But instead of smiling images, It showed scanned documents, the forged gambling debts with Liam's signature, the wire transfer records from Diana's account, and the damning email chain between them. The evidence painted a story not just of a sordid affair, but of a cold, calculated financial conspiracy. The scene erupted into chaos. Liam turned on Diana, his finger jabbing the air, his voice a strangled shout accusing her of setting him up. Diana screamed back, her composure vaporized, shrieking about stolen money and lies. Their beautiful, secret alliance shattered in front of 200 stunned guests, revealing the ugly, snarling truth beneath. Evelyn simply watched, her face a mask of perfect, devastated shock, as the two architects of her betrayal destroyed each other with their own frantic, guilt-ridden accusations. The police, alerted by an anonymous tip about ongoing financial fraud and a disturbance, arrived not to witness a wedding, but to break one up. In the immediate, shrieking aftermath, the story was a feast for the media. "Wedding day revenge from hell," the tabloid screamed. Liam and Diana were taken in for questioning separately. The digital and paper trails Evelyn created were complex enough to warrant a serious fraud investigation. While seasoned detectives quickly grew suspicious of the evidence, the gambling debts were too neatly damning. The emails lacked a true digital fingerprint. They couldn't ignore the very real, recorded confession of intent to defraud. The wedding fund was frozen, then returned to Evelyn after a brief audit. Liam, facing ruinous professional disgrace and abandoned by his partner, was eventually released without charges on the fraud, but the social and career death was absolute. Diana, exposed as a monster in the eyes of her family and country club set, moved to another state, a ghost of her former self. Their mutual hatred for each other was the only bond that remained. Evelyn played her part in the official narrative flawlessly. To the police, she was the heartbroken, lucky victim who had narrowly escaped a predatory scheme. She gave a single, tearful press statement, then vanished from public view. Privately, she sold the exclusive rights to her story of survival for a substantial sum to a streaming service. She used the money, combined with her returned wedding fund, to relocate to the Pacific Northwest. There, she launched a discreet but highly successful branding agency, her clientele unaware of her past. The business thrived on perception, on crafting impeccable images, a skill she had learned in the most brutal way possible. The final, unsettling twist was known only to the lead detective on the case, a weary man named Hayes. He had pieced together the timeline, recognized the terrifying precision of the revenge. The anonymous texts, the hacked screen, the planted documents, all pointed to a mind that was several moves ahead. He believed he was looking at a perfect, untouchable crime of retaliation. He visited Evelyn once, after the dust had settled, under the guise of closing the file. He laid out his theory calmly, watching her closely. Evelyn listened, her expression one of polite, faint confusion. She never admitted a thing. She simply said, "Detective, they confessed their plans on that recording, in their own voices. All I did was happen to have a backup plan. Sometimes the truth doesn't need a push. It just needs a stage." Hayes left, knowing in his bones she was responsible, but also knowing every scrap of evidence pointed away from her, and directly at the two people who had destroyed themselves. The case was closed, unsolved in the ways that mattered most. Evelyn Reed now lives in a beautifully modern home with an ocean view. There are no wedding photos on the walls. On her bookshelf, between volumes on design and psychology, sits a single, unlabeled external hard drive. It contains the only copy of the full, unedited audio recording, a final insurance policy. She never listens to it. Its mere existence is enough. She sleeps soundly, her conscience clear, a woman who didn't wield a knife but a mirror, and watched with cold satisfaction as her betrayers bled out on the glass. The perfect picture was gone, replaced by something far more durable, a legacy of absolute and utterly complete control.